Flaps are a very important tool we have as pilots. Flaps can add lift, add drag, help shorten takeoffs and landings. So here I'm going to review some of the uses I do with flaps and the differences it makes. Here we are in Idaho, taking off from a high density altitude airstrip. I use 30 degrees of flaps, which is the slowest speed the airplane will start flying. This works good in an airplane equipped with the Sportsman stall kit. With the stock wing, I would use 20 degrees of flaps. So I use 30 degrees of flaps on the takeoff roll, then stay in ground effect to gain some speed. Once I'm getting the speed, I start climbing and reduce the flap 10 degrees increments each time. Once over the obstacles and higher terrain, I reduce the flaps to 0. Something important and critical is when to retract the flaps. Here you see I go around, and you will see that I retract the flaps on a critical moment. The airplane sinks. The pilot did good on going around, but the only problem was reducing the flaps at that precise moment. My Cessna 182 is equipped with electric flaps. They're slow to retract and slow to put them down, and in landing like this, where it's so narrow, it's not worth using the concentration to grab the flaps for retracting because they're so slow that you will not make a difference. Manual flaps are a lot faster, but even in these conditions I don't recommend reaching down to grab them. Lose sight of the strip for a second. As an example, here's my friend Jughead landing his 170 on a gravel bar. He has manual flaps, but he also keeps the flaps down all the way. Sometimes you're busy, it's a very narrow, challenging landing. It's not worth losing sight of the landing zone to grab the flaps. It's a landing on a tight strip in Idaho. I set up for canyon speed, and then once I'm getting close to the strip, I put full flaps. Some airplanes do not have flaps, like the Citabria or Piper Clipper, and they do a pretty good job in the backcountry. Those airplanes are a lot lighter than my Cessna 182. I could not do this kind of landings without flaps. There's no way I could do this. Wilson Bar in Idaho is one of those strips you need to anticipate, because you see the strip at the very last moment So you have to come in the canyon with 40 degrees of flaps in the case of the Cessna 182 and at slow speed. So you have to anticipate long ways ahead and be ready to turn final and be set up for the landing. When you add 40 degrees of flaps in the Cessna, it adds a lot of drag. So I find that unless you're coming steep, it's better to come with some power if you want to come slow. Here I'm landing at a gravel bar in Washington State, also full flaps and power. I also like to trim, so in preparation for landing, full prop pitch, and I pull the trim all the way back to lighten the nose. With the trim all the way back and full flaps, a go around would be more difficult, but in this case, since the airplane is lightweight and it's only me, you should do it okay. I have practiced this many times and on a light airplane it's fine. Fully loaded, I will not do it. Once I touch down, I keep the nose up as much as possible to avoid any damage. Here is a view with the chase airplane of the whole approach to the gravel bar. Approach is steep, so I come with full flaps since the beginning and no power. I will start adding power once I'm getting closer to the landing zone. Been practicing between 30 degrees of flaps and 40 degrees of flaps. The airplane stalls at a slower speed at 30 degrees of flaps, so I was thinking it could do shorter landings, but I've been practicing this and you can see the comparison here. I think 40 degrees of flaps are better and it would make you stop in a shorter distance. This first landing was with 40 degrees of flaps and landed on this one with 30 degrees of flaps, and you can see the difference. I found that 30 degrees of flaps makes it a lot harder to slow down, and if you're coming steep it's even more difficult. So I think I will stick using my 40 degrees of flaps. When it's really windy, I use 10 degrees, or sometimes I don't even use flaps. The proper amount of flaps will allow you to fly slow in the canyons and also helps making tight canyon turns. The backcountry is so diverse that use of flaps and knowing your flaps is a must. For canyon turns in the Cessna 182, I have been practicing with 20 and also 30 degrees of flaps. In my airplane with the Sportsman stall kit, 30 degrees makes for very nice tight turns. This is the CA6 Nanchang military trainer. This airplane has split flaps which only add drag, so they do not add lift, so they are not used for takeoff. When you drop flaps in the CA6 Nanchang, the nose pitches up very quickly. This is because it's pneumatic, so they drop quickly. So you have to be ready and pitch down to compensate. No matter the type of aircraft you fly or the style of flaps, we as pilots must understand the effect the use of them will make on the flight. Especially when landing, we as pilots must think ahead, anticipate, and make educated judgments about wind speed, runway conditions, runway length, steep approaches, stuff like that. Also, it's important to know and understand that flaps work together with aircraft power, pitch, and altitude. Flaps are a great tool that will help you out, but also be aware and do not misuse them in some other conditions, like retracting them too early or putting too much flaps at high speed. So at the end, it's very useful to know and understand what those different settings of flaps do to your flight, different conditions, different power settings, pitch settings, and trim settings. Hope you guys enjoy.